thinking about the impact of isolation during lockdown and at any time after brain injury, I think it's definitely one of those aspects of life after brain injury that I hear from survivors where there isn't the same experience for everyone. So what I'm really looking forward to is a bit of a chat and conversation between us, hearing different people's stories and experiences, because I think this more than ever is something where people do have different experiences. So I'll talk a little bit for maybe 10, 15 minutes, share some of the thoughts that I have. I'm not a survivor of brain injury, but I support survivors with their mental health. I support survivors and others in their relationships. So I have some stories supporting people. So I'm going to do that for about 15 minutes. And in that, I'll get into the different aspects of experience and some ideas, initial ideas about how people can manage those challenges. And then importantly, I'd like to hand over to you guys and have a conversation with each of you, because again, I think this more than anything, it's something where people have different experiences. So if we take lockdown, if we take the last year, I noticed that people had very contrasting experiences of that time. Some people did cope well and actually thrived in that they were home, they were in an environment that was in their control, they weren't having to deal with strangers, they weren't having to deal with unpredictable environments. And initially, that was a positive for many people. At the same time, there are many people who are struggling from not being able to access other people, resources, groups, contact with people in the community. And people weren't able to get out of their house where they lived. And there's a real kind of cabin fever aspect to that, being at home, cut off from people. And also the people who live with survivors were also struggling. Everyone has struggled with the impact of COVID. And with everyone struggling in one household, stuck in the same place, that is a bit of a pressure cooker. And many people have struggled with distress, mental ill health, relationship strain and conflict, domestic violence sometimes. And as the year progressed last year, the resources that were put in place that were things like this, Zoom calls, really, really important and offered so many new opportunities in that, like here, we're connecting from all across the UK and Ireland, and that's amazing, isn't it? That wouldn't be possible in the same way in a face-to-face meeting. But to be in front of a screen for a long period of time is tiring. It's tiring for people who aren't survivors of brain injury. I can imagine how more tiring and draining it is to do everything via a device screen. So reaching out and accessing kind of social groups, headway resources, for example, may not be the same to do that online compared to face-to-face. And so I recognize that really, really tough for people, and people have, for many people got into some very difficult and dark places. And I thought we could take that point of understand what's been the nature of that kind of isolation when it is experienced as difficult and challenging and demanding. And we can think about COVID, but we can also think about life as a brain injury survivor anyway, because in 1991, 1992, there was a research study that showed that survivors of brain injury and their significant others became more socially isolated over time, particularly years 2 to 5 post-injury, that more and more people dwindled away. So this is not unique to the current times. It is an issue. And actually, interestingly, an amazing research paper has just been published this year by Niamh Lowe and her colleagues from Ireland. And the title of the research paper is called Lonely in My Head. And they interviewed survivors and found that there were kind of two kinds of loneliness. One is where you're not seen, and that's the invisible disability that I'm sure many of you have experienced. People aren't noticing that you're there in the first place, or people aren't noticing that you with particular needs, particular challenges aren't there. You're being overlooked, you're not seen, you're staying in the shadows. So that's kind of a loneliness of not being seen in the first place. And then there's a second kind of loneliness of being seen and then being rejected, being seen and pushed away. And I think those two kind of aspects of loneliness are really important to think about. And maybe each of you might think of, that one or both may apply to you, where not being seen, understood, witnessed, heard in the first place, and that's a lonely place, no one alongside you. And then you might feel that you have been seen and been actively pushed away or rejected. The things that you need, the things that need to be different to allow contact with other people to be manageable, to be enjoyable in the way that it might have been before the injury. That's a big ask of yourself, of other people, and maybe some people aren't able to meet you there. So that could be a rejection, a pushing away. And this research paper talked about kind of visible with cracks, the idea of being seen with needs being different and still accepted and supported nonetheless. That's what many survivors were asking, that, it's not meeting, joining, connecting with other people in a conditional way, in a way that other people can manage who don't have a brain injury. It's actually having other people willing to meet you where you are and feel accepted with whatever you need to support that interaction. So that's an interesting paper. I think it's one of those research papers that actually really hits the nail on. It really kind of gets to the point that actually, like, this has not been explored by researchers before, this aspect of loneliness and isolation. And I know Dr. Stephen Dunn in the University of Sunderland is also doing some active research on loneliness as well. As a group in Northern Ireland, Dr. Rauch and colleagues are looking at this as well in interest. So it's definitely being put on the map. Dr. Salas in Chile is looking at the importance of friendships and relationships as well. So it's finally getting on the map for researchers to understand what's unique about loneliness and isolation. And again, I'm looking forward to hearing your voices later in the session, because this will be recorded, this will be a resource for other survivors, families, professionals supporting survivors. The next bit I want to say is that I think there's something else that's quite unique to the pandemic that pushes on a nerve or a button, a point of vulnerability and fragility for survivors. Before the pandemic, many survivors have spoken to me about a feeling that they don't have a thick skin in the way that they used to. They can't brush things off. It's not like water washing off a duck's back. That the kind of difficult stuff to deal with out there in the world doesn't just bounce off. They can't resiliently push through in the way that people used to. Instead, there's a fear that it kind of gets under people's skin and can really overwhelm. And that people have described that in terms of dealing with what's challenging out there in the world, politics, other people. What's going to be on the news. And this was all pre-COVID, this idea of just the bad stuff out in the world gets inside now. And I feel a bit more vulnerable and fragile. So I'm going to try not put myself in that situation and to stay where it's safe and not get out there because I can't weather it in the same way. And then you have COVID, a virus that literally can come from the outside and get inside you and make you ill and leave thousands, hundreds of thousands of people with symptoms that are either life-threatening, life-changing, very similar to the experiences of brain injury survivors. People have got acquired brain injuries from COVID, they've got strokes and hemorrhages. And so that's a very concrete, palpable fear now that going outside, there's danger, there's something quite dangerous outside. And that's led to the need to kind of stay put at home more to stay safe, but stay safe and lonely, perhaps. Stay safe and anxious about the world outside. And then I think looking at this over time from the different lockdowns that we've had in the UK, and the fact that we're in a week where a big set of restrictions about doing things indoors have been lifted. Cinemas are open, you can go do exercise classes now. I teach Tai Chi, some of you may know, so I'm able to teach classes indoors this week. That's a huge, big change. At the same time, we've got rumblings about the Indian variant, haven't we? And so this is that we don't have a green light just to drop our guard and ease into things. There's still this uncertainty. And I think, many survivors talk about transitions being difficult. When there's a routine, when something is established in whatever it is, that's manageable. But when something changes, that's really discombobulating. That's really overwhelming. People lose their bearings. It's fatiguing to get used to new things. And so the transitions of into lockdown, out of lockdown, but in a life that wasn't the same as it was before, back into lockdown, I think the transitions as well, and if other people are managing transitions in a different way, it's then another source of loneliness. It's no one. That's the not being seen loneliness. No one can see what it's like for me, or a fear of doing the wrong thing while struggling with that, and then having that active, pushed away, rejected, being seen but not good enough aspect. So those are some of the ideas and thoughts and reflections that I've been picking up from the people I've been working with. Say a little bit about what may help. The one amazing thing that has come about is that all of the third sector organisations connected to brain injury have produced a wealth of resources, both nationally and in local groups, as well as the connections I have with Headway nationally and other organisations such as Different Strokes and Same You. I've been doing work with Headway Oxfordshire, Headway Thames Valley, and hearing about how local groups have stayed connected, holding survivors in mind. And there are resource access online now, aren't there? There are resources to explore strategies, such as Headway's recent video on using mindfulness in this current situation. So there are things out there that you can access from the comfort of your own house, find some strategies and some tools to manage some of the feelings I've been talking about. But I think ultimately we do need other people in a way that's manageable to us. So the other important thing is the fact that we can connect together like we're doing today and hear about each other's stories. And with everything I've said, knowing that one person's story will be different to another person's, but hopefully we'll find some connections and resonances in hearing about your experiences now of isolation, loneliness. What kind of loneliness? The not being seen, the being seen and not being good enough, being pushed away. I'd love to hear about your stories. So over to you guys. So anyone's got any thoughts or reflections or questions? To put your hand up or mute yourself.
All right, I'll go through all the hands that I see up. Lewis Rees, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, certainly. I'm a survivor of a significant TBI and a stroke. I can associate with what the doctor said about having a thin skin and being oversensitive afterwards. I was in law enforcement for various forms of law enforcement for 46 years and had to finish because of my brain injury. But I find myself, I'm very sensitive and very quick to anger, very defensive, aggressive. I don't know if it's associated with the brain injury or but I was a little bit that way before, but I had a very thick skin before. I no longer have that. It's a defense that I no longer have. So, you know, I can associate with what the doctor said then, very much so. In fact, it's my primary problem.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I can't imagine what that's like to have your job, your core bread and butter, being so dependent on having a thick skin. I can't imagine what the kind of things you've experienced in your job before your injury. And then for that not to be there automatically in the way that you've relied on in your life, I can't imagine how much of a change that is for you. Yeah,
I used to be a sort of moderately high profile person. I'm not bragging or anything, but I feel now I'm a nobody. And I feel people don't listen to me, don't look at me in the same way as you implied earlier. Anyway, that's enough for me.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Lewis. Thank you so much. I'm going to go through now. If anybody's got any comments, questions, could you just put your hand up? Emma Doherty.
Okay. No, I just want to say very quickly about you were saying about people who thrived in lockdown, and I loved lockdown last year. Like I just really enjoyed it, and I didn't have people weren't expecting me to go, and I would have difficulty in like social situations and stuff like that, and I would get very anxious. And so I enjoyed not having to go anywhere, and I'm lucky that I have quite good IT skills, so I was able to keep in touch with people online and do Zoom and all with Headway and stuff like that, so it was great. But I just find now that I'm getting a wee bit, now that the restrictions are coming now, you just feel really anxious about it coming back, about everything coming back, because I love lockdown so much, but I'm just really worried about it coming back too quickly or something, and then just being overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, I think that's a common experience. I'm hearing that talked about a lot of people, this fear of going back into it and dealing with that transition, and people not having faith and confidence that the people in power are doing this the right way also, and this fear like it's kind of on me how this is going to go, and feeling quite exposed in that way. Yeah.
If you raise your hand. Yeah. Raise your hand.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you for sharing that. I've got two gentlemen and one's put his hand up. I'm so sorry, I can't see your name right now, but would you like to share your...
Colin.
Colin, hi Colin.
Yeah, I've had a brain injury for 4 years. I was in the fire service, watch manager. I didn't know anybody for 7 months, couldn't even speak to them properly. People were coming in to see me, talking. You don't know the names or anything? Sometimes I don't know the names now, even properly all the time. I've got my good friend here who's always comes in to see me. He's in the fire service still. And they really helped me. I've had a couple of lads, quite a few lads come in and give me a touch and all that kind of thing. Miss me kids, that kind of thing. Not with them anymore. So it just carries on. But I'm getting.
You just find it hard to communicate at times.
Yeah, I find it hard to communicate sometimes to the doctors and all that kind of thing. You know, I've had trouble with them, and the other girls have been saying, no, it's all right, just relax all the time, because sometimes you just get annoyed, isn't it? It's about it, though. But I'm out good. I can take my dog for a walk a couple of times a day, whatever. Go get me some shopping and that kind of thing with Lee or wife. Sometimes comes now, but that's about it. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And do you know what, Lee? For someone who says they kind of worry about communicating, you've just put a voice to a really important experience in front of 50 odd other people, and that's been amazing. Thank you so much for doing that and describing your experiences. And I can't imagine what it's like to have, on the one hand, a couple of trusted people like the guy with you there, and that you can rely on to help you, but at the same time being worried about being with other people, worried about, you know, not remembering people's names, knowing who people are, not knowing how it's going to go when you're with other people.
Yeah.
And to link that back to the previous comment from Emma, like, you know, that kind of need to do that, you might have had to put that on hold for a few months because of lockdown, and now people are out and about. So does that bring that feared scenario back of, oh, I've got to deal with people again now, I've got to, you know, I've got to remember people's names, I've got to be, you know, interact with people face to face, and that's, I'm sure that is a real mixed bag for people. But it's really important to hear that, you know, people aren't alone with these feelings and these fears, these anxieties. So thank you, Lee. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important for people to hear.
Think about that sometimes, yeah. Again,
you don't have your fear of meeting up, do you? It's just that
I don't want to.
you get irritated because you can't remember things. And
like I said, I can't remember things, as Lee says. These good lad, my friends.
That irritates you, doesn't it?
It irritates me that I know them, and I've known them for 24 years, and the lads who were in the forces, when I took about the airborne for 6 years, 7 years, so it was just a bit,
it's just frustrating, isn't it?
Frustrating for me, that kind of thing.
I understand completely what you're saying. I've had the same thing. It's you forget. I have complete amnesia, but I still have a terrible memory. It's awful.
Yeah.
And it's embarrassing sometimes, and annoying and frustrating, and people don't seem to understand. And it's
yeah,
it really gets me as well. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly to me.
Thank you both for sharing. David Keane,
Hi.
would you like to?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm thinking that I might be a little longer, quite a lot longer, since I had my brain injury, and I'm kind of back to normal. But the thing is, I was never that much of a social butterfly in this. So in a way, COVID was, oh, well, I didn't have many friends, so can't go anywhere to make any, well, whatever. And that can that be the problem, that COVID has been a case where no authorities have given us some good ground rules about, you should probably do this, not do this, try and do that. I mean, we're shoved into not being in contact except over the web, but they don't have rules, we don't have rules or ideas about how to go, which is kind of it's just dealing with not as much. Do you think?
Yeah, I think that confusion is definitely felt by people, and obviously the different nations have had different approaches, but I know that confusion is a common experience, and again, maybe when there's transitions as well, getting used to one scenario, and then when that changes, regrouping and understanding that. And I suppose when it's confusing on the outside, when it's confusing outside your four walls, home becomes important, potentially as a source of stability and predictability. You know what to expect from home. But equally, for many people, home might not have been like that. I'd be interested to hear if anyone has had that experience, if they found that they've had more arguments with people in their house while being in lockdown. It could be, you know, the kids struggling with homeschooling, because that's been really tough for kids as well. It could be with partners or other family members who everyone's been struggling with this. What's that been like, you know, to all be under the same roof?
Thank you both very much. Thank you. Patrick Leonard, have you got something you want to contribute?
I've lost the whole image thing here. I don't know if you're hearing me or not.
We can hear you all right,
Yeah.
Patrick. Yep.
Right. No, I'm in Northern Ireland. I had a severe bad traffic accident 7 years ago that caused my brain injury. And I totally understand the way these other people have been portraying about being confused, not remembering people's names and things like that. And I can only focus and concentrate on one detail at a time. And this is what I actually want to ask the doctor, because I focused on him saying Niamh Lowe had written a book, and I would like the name of the book.
Thanks for that
Lonely in
question.
my head.
It's a research article, so it's not a book, but it's called Lonely in My Head. So if you Google Lonely in My Head and brain injury, you should find it. And maybe, I don't know if Fiona Tamsin could put a link to it perhaps in the chat.
Yeah, we can put a link to it in the chat, and we can also put a link to it in the description of the YouTube video that we upload later on, so we can make that available to people.
And also, what on the same issue, Stephen Dunn's research, I think, is Stephen actively looking for participants at the minute?
He is, yes. So Stephen's doing a piece of research from the University of Sunderland about experiences of loneliness after brain injury. We do have details about that on the website at the moment as well, so I can pop a link to that on the chat section.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
You're welcome. Just on that note, I was really struck by the title. I think it's an excellently worded title, because to me it conveys the idea of, like, you're lonely inside your head even before you have to deal with other people. Like, the brain injury has made a disconnect between your mind and the rest of you, and that's a lonely, imprisoned place. And then you get to your head, and then you've got the outside world and dealing with other people. So I thought that the title was really powerful.
Great. I think we have a question from Nigel F. A comment or a question from Nigel F.
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. I want to agree with what Emma said earlier on. I've actually enjoyed the pandemic. You know, I'm kind of tired of hearing people using the pandemic as an excuse for loneliness. You know, for once, I felt a wee bit normal again. If you've had a brain injury, which I have had, you feel some sort of a lesser person for a while. But then during the pandemic, nobody could go out. So all of a sudden, I was back to being the new normal. Now, I hate clinicians telling me about the new normal. It really gets in my goat. But because it's now popular to suggest that, well, COVID has changed everybody's life, it hasn't. Not at all. And another thing, just on the same subject, loneliness is always a bad thing. Loneliness is bad, but being alone isn't bad. You know, I don't really like people, to be honest. So I quite like being in my own company. And it's been quite nice over the last year being able to just Zoom. You know, Zoom's a great thing. Think on it this way. Twice now I've had a strange doctor in a purple tent in my house talking to me. And, you know, that would never have happened before the pandemic. Zoom has allowed that to happen. So Zoom has allowed me to meet more people. Zoom has allowed me to prevent people meeting me when I want. Loneliness and being alone, I think we need to think about our definitions here.
Thank you. Yeah, apologies for the purple backdrop. Well, I'm quite liking it, actually. It's a hangover from my son had a party at home, of course, because it's been locked down at the weekend. So yeah, but I'm working the purple behind me at the minute. Thank you. So yeah, it's an interesting one. So you've really important points there. So loneliness is a subjective state of mind. So people can feel lonely if they're surrounded by people in a busy shopping centre. People can feel lonely because they're not being seen or overwhelmed. Those people aren't a source of connection or reassurance to them. And equally, someone could be living complete isolation and not feel lonely. That's a really important point. So we are talking about a state of mind rather than something that can be determined from the outside. Yeah. And then that second point about what is positive about lockdown conditions? Well, it means that the pace of the world does slow down. You're not bombarded with stimuli and you're not bombarded with other people, the hustle bustles and around it. And yeah, other people said it's a bit of a leveler. The playing field gets leveled so that, you know, when someone needs things to be slower and more focused after a brain injury, then for once that's possible. Before lockdown, one bit of my job has been supporting people back to work. Some of you may have been in that return to work seminar I did with my colleagues a few months back, the webinar. We were constantly trying to get people opportunities to work from home. Like, you know, before that was fashionable to do so, just to have the quieter, controllable, manageable environment, so people had a fighting chance of doing some aspects of their job. And then everyone's been put into that situation, and many people find actually it's better for their well-being. So yeah, thank you for those points. So it is completely subjective, and I imagine that within us as a group today, some people, you know, we might be split into people that thrived and found benefits, other people that really struggled as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Charles. Helen D. Have we got Helen D with a comment? Helen D?
Unmute. Sorry. Now you've got me, yeah. That likes the purple, you know, it happens to be the same. A little bit different. I had my brain injury about the same year as Headway was established, was first put together 41 years ago. And my loneliness has been, well, until the last 3 years when I started jumping up and down and getting help from somebody who knew something about brain injury. Because for the 38 years, it was, oh, I had survived, I was out of the coma, and there wasn't any help. I didn't, until I joined Headway 3 years ago, I hadn't met another brain injury survivor. And so I didn't realize how lonely I was. I had the hidden disability, and it was hidden from myself because it wasn't pointed out. I didn't know any of the symptoms. I didn't know that they were symptoms of my disability. And so I was very lonely inside, not knowing anybody else who was similar to me. And it's been great in the last 3 years meeting other people who have survived different causes, different symptoms, but a lot of us have the same symptoms, and being able to see them in other people means it's easier for me to identify with that. So yes, I'm missing my face-to-face contacts, but the Zoom is helping me a lot with that. Other point is, when I was looking for help to start with, and it wasn't with brain injury people, it was a local club, I found that a lot of people my age, we were enjoying having a routine, a class to go to every week. And well, it was me that brought up that it was loneliness. We were becoming that. They weren't brain injury, they were chronic pain sufferers and things. But once I brought it up, so many of them, all in the 60s, well, a lot of them in their 60s, 70s, were admitting how lonely they were. So it's a thing that we're not very good at admitting to.
Thank you. Again, some excellent points, really, really important points. So your first point there about recognition of loneliness and the importance of loneliness by other people. I think you mentioned professionals, clinicians. I just want to go to that because sometimes clinicians need a label or a diagnosis.
They didn't know much about brain injury.
Yeah, so there's not knowing about brain injury, and even which is still far too common, unfortunately. And then even those that do work with brain injury, when it comes to forms of kind of mental distress, psychological distress, need specific labels like anxiety and depression in a kind of medicalized view. But the more kind of existential levels of loneliness, so glad there are now research papers mentioned on loneliness, on putting myself back together, putting my identity back together, on finding a place for the brain injury in my on these bigger kind of level themes that particularly services that are short-term in nature, it's just too big to know how to respond to that. So I think having the conversation with the long game with people who've been navigating lives as brain injury survivors over many years is really important to think about these needs that are over a whole lifespan, rather than can be put in a particular box. So that's one thing. Then your other comments made me think about going to clubs and resources out in the community. And we know that that's you know, even if things are out there, things haven't been there to go to in the last year, but even when things are out there, getting to somewhere, making it manageable and accessing a social or leisure or hobby club can be really problematic. It can be part of that kind of being seen but kind of pushed away, that it's not just the question of getting to a class or a group in the way that someone who hasn't got a brain injury can just do. It can be really fatiguing and tiring. There could be accessibility issues, either in terms of mobility or in terms of cognitively accessible. And so the trying something out, going out and it not working out, and maybe even being an adversarial experience, can be a huge pushback back into a lonely place and a more hopeless place, having tried something and it not worked out. So yeah, some really important points. And so then is a value of being seen and heard by other people who might have walked something similar, something, you know, other survivors. And again, every survivor's injury is different, but to hear some common themes are like, yeah, I've been there, I know what that's like, as we're doing today, I think so important for that recognition and witnessing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for sharing that. Sue Williams, I know you've been waiting a while, so would you like to go ahead?
Hi, thank you. Just a couple of things. I've got a traumatic brain injury, which I had about 3 years ago. Socially, for me, it feels like having a glass wall between me and other people. No one can see it's there, but it's a really hard barrier to try and overcome. And you do tend to sit on one side of it, looking at everybody else, your friend groups, your professional groups, carrying on as they were before, but they can't see that barrier. So they're encouraging you to join in and you can't. And I think there is, it's very difficult to communicate that there is a glass wall between you and everybody else. And one of the things with COVID is that there was everybody ended up with a barrier between themselves and other people, but it was much more recognized. So I think that's one thing that for me, having a brain injury, the barrier that you have in terms of social engagement is just not seen, but everybody saw the barriers which arose from COVID. In terms of going through COVID myself, it's not really been a either or in terms of it's been good or it's been bad. It's been a mixture of the two. So there's been things like a lot of people, the shift to online interaction. I've been able to join in with things I wasn't able to. Being able to meet person one-to-one, I can't filter out background noise or background conversations. So when we were allowed to do things, being able to see one person at a time has been fantastic, and I've really enjoyed that. But at the same time, I'm one of life's huggers, really, I guess, and that physical loneliness. And there's so many different facets to social connection and loneliness that I think we haven't maybe really quite picked apart. And I miss that, I miss that kind of more physical engagement with people. But in terms of where we are now, I think that the hardest thing I find is that there isn't recognition that the reopening of society isn't accessible to everybody, and it doesn't feel accessible to me. And you have a feeling almost like going back to the adjustment that you first had of acknowledging that you can't engage socially with a brain injury, and you're having to do it again, and you're feeling left behind and left out again. And there's a lot of talk about we need to learn from this and we will have empathy towards loneliness. But at the same time, I don't at the moment see a huge amount of that in practice. And I would really like to know, does anybody have any experiences or research to share around how this experience can help build both more empathy, not just between people with brain injuries, and I'd love to see this type of conversation going across the board with everybody, but also in terms of accessibility. We put in physical access for people with disability, quite rightly, things like wheelchair ramps, but there's not much focus given on accessibility for people with brain injuries.
Thank you, Sue. Can I ask you a question? Sorry. To invite that debate, what do you think? Do you think that when people, if we get to a point where we can return to some kind of normality, do you think people will remember what it's like to see glass walls when they hadn't seen them before, or do you think it will be too quickly forgotten?
I think it will be forgotten, not intentionally and not out of not caring, but because people don't particularly want to remember unpleasant situations, and also because it can also provoke, I think, in some of my friends, feelings of guilt. And they're lovely people, but they, nobody wants to feel guilty about going off and having a social time and think, oh, well, actually, maybe I should remember what it's like to not be able to see someone in person. So I think if people do forget this experience, it's not out of selfishness and it's not out of not caring, but it might be to do with other factors.
Thank you. Yeah, it'd be really interesting to take up. Thank you, Sue. It'd be interesting to take up that. How do people got some responses to that? One thing I also am aware of that we have seen last year that when lockdowns were eased, there was like a frenzy, wasn't there? That there were mass gatherings of people at beaches or in parks, and many people felt that people were acting very selfishly at the point of coming together because it was just me, or my family, just a free for all. And, people weren't, for example, respecting the need to be safe around each other during last year. So yeah, that I'm wondering what that's going to be like. Will this lead to a more patient, tolerant, empathic society, or will it be quickly forgotten, or will the worst happen? Will people just be back in it for what they can get for themselves? Yeah, and I know that these are things that survivors have always feared anyway. People not being patient with them, people not being, not taking the time to slow down or hold people with different needs in mind. Yeah, so there's the really pertinent points there. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Sue. David, shall I come to you? And then if anybody does have any questions afterwards, we'll pop it in the chat.
Yeah, just to say, what I fear is that the getting together on beaches or parks or things, that a lot of everyday people in everyday society are very knee-jerk about, oh no, they're allowing us to do that, oh, it's all going to rush, do this. And I think what those of us who've had brain injuries or other challenges and need to take things at a more measured pace, they get left behind. I fear we all get left behind a bit. And I just fear that only being challenged by something that we've always been challenged by. Oh no, the great common cold, but this time with extra things about choking and stuff. That we all know, and so they've just gone into their mindset about can't do's. I hope the more complex and the more mature approaches to certain things, such as we're suffering, won't be forgotten. I hope it doesn't.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I hope so too. One thing I think seems to, that at the minute, it seems to be more awareness of fatigue. So many people struggling with long COVID, struggling with fatigue issues, where it seems to have been, that seems to be different in that before, if you've never had a neurological injury or ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, you won't know what disabling fatigue is. You'll think it's the tiredest you've ever been without, living that very different experience. Long COVID, and many people know people who've been suffering with long COVID, does seem to put fatigue and something, energy levels being very fragile and not recovering automatically. It seems to be in people's mindset a bit more at the minute, but I think I fear, and I agree with Sue, that it's not pleasant to think about. So as soon as people don't have to think about it, they won't, which means that it's down to like brain injury awareness weeks and things like this, right, where we just putting it back in a good work of Headway and others, just to keep putting that back in the public consciousness is so important. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. We do have a couple more comments coming up in the chat function, so thank you to Orla and Emma for using that. Giles, would you rather keep this discussion going, or would you like to continue with your talk? What would be your preferred approach?
No, I think this is the best. This is the good stuff right now. So I'm really keen for us just to keep chatting till the time finishes. Yeah.
Yep, brilliant. Okay, Orla, I know you've posted your question. Would you like me to read it out, or would you like to discuss it yourself?
Hello, I can read it out, actually. I just asked, is it possible to have a thicker skin with a brain injury and let things slide away? Can that change? I've always been a sensitive person, even before my brain injury, but I'm more sensitive and I don't have a thick skin at all anymore. And I'm wondering, can that change or not really? Or does it go in periods of time where it's better and periods of time when it's not so good?
Thank you, Orla. That's an amazing question. From what I've learned from survivors is that, like, resilience and capacity to endure and step up to challenges can be fostered for discrete periods of time, through things like, on an individual level, it's things like managing fatigue and managing the environment, so the best version of you is able to meet a particular challenge at a given point. What I would say more, I don't think you can hear that because there's a big thunderstorm going overhead now. I don't think you hear the thunder behind me. What I would say is that the more enduring solution is not to do this as an individual, not to be aim for a thick-skinned individual on your own. We are stronger by being interconnected with other people, being a team. Like the person who was a firefighter will know this. You don't go in on your own, you go in with your team. And that strength against the world comes through being connected with other people. So from my sense, there's managing personal attributes and resources, but actually getting better at clever and at being part of a partnership, a group, a duo, people that you can trust, because we're hearing how dealing with other people can be really challenging too, but knowing how to be with certain trusted people to take on things with people alongside you, not on your own. So that's my 2 pennies worth on how you thicken skin where it's possible to do so.
Thank you. Thank you.
We had a comment from Emma. Do you want to, would you like to read it out again, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I was just making the point that you were saying about how fatigue is talked about a lot more now because of COVID and long COVID and things, and that's like brain fog as well was another symptom that people seem to get when they had COVID, and it was talked about a lot more. You would see it, articles written about it, or just people just every day talking about it. So I thought that was another positive, that maybe people would be more mindful of that moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And there's been a few things on there: fatigue, brain fog, pain. Long COVID is, pain, sensory pain. That's an issue, and the fluctuations of emotions. So that kind of volume switch of different emotions, just going from 0 to 10. Again, it's some of the things that really do overlap with post-brain injury experience, and I'm just hoping it's held on to. Yeah.
Thank you, Emma. Does anybody else have any other questions? Or Lewis Rees?
Yeah, I'd just like to say quickly regarding what Orla said about sensitivity, because it's something I mentioned earlier. I've gone from very thick skin to very thin skin. But I've done some courses and some webinars and things. I did PTSD, CBT and things, and they showed me some tools how to deal with that, sort of how to not take offense and feel hurt by by certain things, you know, take positive actions and thoughts. So there is a way forward there, I think. Ola, I just sort of perhaps give you some hope there.
Definitely, there are strategies that help, but it's really good point, Lewis. But typically, you need someone else alongside you, be it a therapist or, you know, someone in a brain injury support group, or someone who's made an informational resource online to help you access those tools. And I'd also like to echo again the recent mindfulness video that Headway's created as well. It's another excellent resource just to show how you can sit with your breath in your body and manage the spin cycle that can be your mind sometimes. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
Actually, would one of you put the link to that on the chat as well, the mindfulness video with Neil's Dr.
Yeah, of course, Bjorn, would you be all right to do that? We have Lenovo. Do you want to?
Is that who you're referring to?
MLitt's name.
My name is it's me you're talking to.
I think it's Bernard, yeah.
Yes, Bernard, yes. It's 9 years from I had my brain injury. But we're talking about lockdown. The only real thing that I missed about lockdown that made a difference to us, because we are sort of in a lockdown from a acquired brain injury. Life changes for us. We're not accepted the same. People don't understand our situation. But the thing that I missed about lockdown was the most thing that affected me most of it was not been fit to meet. We have a Headways group and we have a very close group, and we could talk about anything among each other because we all had the same problem. Like I had a business that I was third generation and had to give it up because it's a pub. But I just was, well, after my injury, maybe 3 years before I was back in it again. But I just, when conversation starts with somebody else on the face, I just lost all track and get confused, and at the finish I had to give it up, and now there's a triumph thing from it. I've now passed it on. I've actually sold it. I was let there for 3 years, but there's just no way I could go back at all. It's just, people don't understand their problems. And when we meet together, brain injury people meet together, we all know or have a fair idea what life is like for us. And we can discuss things, and I've discussed things that I wouldn't even discuss with the people at home. When I've been at Headways with good friends that I have in it, but they can understand because they're in the same situation. It's not easy trying to be a new person because you can't get back to being the person you were before. And it's a different life. And you're talking about your glass cage. We were in the glass cage because I had a lot of good friends. I have good friends that stuck by me, but after my injury, there's people come to see me in the house and I think it was to look at me because I've never seen them since. And they don't involve me in anything. They just more or less want to see what way I looked. I fell from doing a roof, and I don't actually remember what happened, how it happened. But I felt as if they come to look at me just to see if I could find anything wrong or see anything. But I feel people with brain injuries to express themselves, we would need to all walk around with a bandage wrapped around their head so people know there's something wrong with us. People just can't accept. I found that even in the bar, people said, "Oh, look at you, there's nothing wrong with you." And it was a hurtful thing to say because they didn't understand the pressure I was going through just to get in the bar. It was a different generation, a lifestyle that I grew up in that I couldn't handle anymore. And that was a big knockback for me. And as I say, our Headways group we have is we're not fit to meet in person anymore, and that is a big thing. Yes, we do a Zoom, but Zoom's not the same because everybody's talking or everybody's in the group. Whereas if I was at the group, I'd want to say something to one person in particular. Me and him could go and have, or me and her could go and have that conversation. Whereas I can't do that in Zoom, and it makes life a lot awkwarder for us. So, most important thing about coming out a lockdown to me is just fit to meet up with the people, not with everybody, but people that understand and can respect what brain injured people lives are like and how it's different from a normal life. The class now is our normal life, but it's not everybody's normal life. We can accept ourselves, and as people say, I've just even yesterday it happened. A fella told me his name, and 2 months later I had asked him again. I felt embarrassed for doing, but I explained to him that I had a brain problem, and I said, "What was your name again?" I couldn't remember. But my distant memory from before my accident, I can remember things maybe better than I could have before my injury. But you see, since that, when people say to you, what are you going to tell me? And if they hadn't asked me, I could have told them. But because they asked me that question, my mind just blank, and it not come to me. And that leaves you in an awkward situation when you're in a company. You try and tell anybody something, you know.
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. I think that's you've hit the nail on the head, haven't you? To being understood, being seen, and sometimes that can only be done, or can be done most directly when you're physically in a room with other people, like the other survivors, like the Headway group you mentioned. And it's harder to do that through a Zoom call. I'm hoping that those of you here today have felt understood by the conversation, by the way that other people contribute things that we've touched on. I hope that's left you feeling less alone and understood. But I do acknowledge that we're all a little bit removed through our screens, although we're able to come together in a way that we couldn't do face to face. But I'm hoping that you get that balance of recognition and being understood by physical human beings around you soon, if you need that, or at the same time you're enjoying doing things online and having the connection at a different pace as well. So you'll know yourself probably what kind of interaction is best for you right now. Feelings of loneliness, and as we said, that's not a loneliness, the state of mind, regardless of who's physically around you or not. So I'm hoping that through the conversations today, you've been able to work out, what is it that I need right now? It might have been different from what I needed 3 months ago or last year. Do I need to see people again? Will seeing people physically be too much for me right now? I'm going to just not join the party of everyone rushing back out into the world and take a slower pace of things. Are there things online that would help me right now? Or if I'm feeling really alone and isolated in my house, where can I get some help to get some of the tools and resources? I think the stuff online from Headway is a great place to start. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bernard. Do we have any more final comments, questions? I'll quickly go through. Oh, I have a name, Vincent Brogan, but I'm not sure if it is the name. Would you like to introduce yourself?
It is Dipna Brogan.
All right, sorry about that. Would you like to share your comments?
I went. Oh, sorry. I didn't have my mental health was I just couldn't cope with my mental health because I didn't want to know about my mental health because it was too upsetting. So I just went and did whatever I could do, and got on with it. I 45 years ago, that's what I did. And but I have like about 20 years ago, I couldn't cope, and I just you know, I was very upset, and my husband says, "What on earth are you doing?" And I think I just felt the problems with my mental, no, my head injury, and that's how I felt, and I had 3 children, and after my accident, and it was a good idea, a good idea, because I did what I was. I did what I was enjoying the time that it. So the time that I was being myself, and not having I'm so sorry. It is important that I just felt alive again.
Thank you, Dimna. That's some really important kind of 2 points that I've taken from what you said. Thank you for sharing your experiences, because some people, getting on with it is the most important thing to do. And maybe right now people are returning back to the small things that were taken for granted, you know, and then were taken away from us because of lockdown, and now are coming back. Like be able to sit in a coffee shop and have a coffee. We haven't been able to do that. And again, as survivors, you already know about what everyday things can be when how important they can be when they've taken away from you because of accident, illness, disability. But then on the other hand, so the getting on with it, the pleasure of small everyday things is really important. On the other hand, brain injury can lead to such completely different experiences outside the realm of most other people's lives that you need a different kind of conversation with someone to have recognized and to feel listened to and understood, as we heard previously, because other people can't do that. So the getting on with it and the connecting with others and having very unique experiences shared and heard and seen and understood is so important. So thank you for putting a spotlight on both of those things, Dimna. Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much. Right. Do we have any more comments? Let me just go through. No, I think that's all of them now. So, Giles, would you like to make any closing remarks before we finish up?
I think I'm so glad that we did this, and thank you, Headway, for organising this and bringing people together. The one thing that is possible from a state of loneliness is when it feels safe enough, talk to other lonely people about feeling lonely, and thereby feel connected and heard and understood, even if people's experiences are different. So that's how we build that resilience together, by being connected and less isolated on the margins ourselves. So I really feel that through all the different experiences and the acknowledgement of each other's journeys that we've heard in the last hour or so, that we've achieved that today. And of course, this may be a starting point. Maybe this triggers some thoughts for each of you. This will be recorded, so you can go and watch it again and check in, and you can check in some of the resources that have been signposted today. And we don't know what's going to happen, do we, over the next few months, how things will change further. We're all taking one day, 1 week at a time. Just check in. Your needs now may be different to your needs in a few weeks' time. Just check in with yourselves on what you need from other people, the kind of contact that you need, and the kind of resources you need to manage each of those scenarios. So yeah, thank you guys, and look forward to seeing you for a future webinar, which I think is going to be on couples relationships. I'm going to do in a little while time. So I'll see some of you back then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Giles, and thank you everyone for joining us and for all of your contributions. I agree, it's been really insightful, really useful, and thank you all again for joining us. Dr. Yates, thank you so much for your time and for those comments. Again, I think it's been really useful to hear all of that. Just again, as a reminder, you can watch this again on YouTube. We will upload it shortly, and we'll pop in all of the links to the resources that we've discussed throughout this this webinar into there. And we will finish it there. So thank you again. We look forward to hearing all of your Action for Brain Injury Week activities across the week. And take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello, Lewis.
Hi.
My name's Hillary.
Hi there, how are you? I've just been press leave.
All right, I thought the wee group is this all that Melanie's organised today?
No, it came through the Headway group. I just enrolled. I don't know who specifically organised it.